Okay, welcome to Into the Channel, a podcast primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, subscribe or follow us, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Ratings and reviews, always appreciated at ITC_pod on X, at Into the Channel pod on Threads. I am your host, Dino de Cespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
Doing great, buddy. I hope everybody had some time to rest and relax over this holiday period. And for some, that might have meant catching up on documentaries or TV shows, and maybe even certain documentaries that would be of interest to fans of this program or the hosts on this program.
I'm glad you brought this up. So I wanted to circle back to something we touched on a couple weeks back. Netflix dropped a documentary about the U.S. women's national team titled Under Pressure. Highly recommend. It's been a minute since that one dropped, and we both had time to take in all 4 parts. So I want to talk about it. I've got takes. Gotta imagine you've got takes. Mr. Grant Engel, let's get into this one. Where do you want to get started?
All right, so I'm going to crack a beer for this one because there's a lot to digest.
Let's go.
Across these 4 episodes.
I'll sip the coffee while you're doing that.
So for anyone, and I'm sure all of us have, obviously, but for anyone who's ever read anything about cognitive behavioral therapy strategies, I know people tend to come across these things like in a professional setting, or I came across them in like parenting books and things like that. There is an idea that I always like of the responsibility pie, where it's basically you identify all the factors that led to an outcome, and then from there you kind of assign each factor that led to that outcome a percentage, and voila, you have a delicious pie chart of the responsibility pie. So we obviously know, it's no secret at this point, probably a disappointing result for U.S. women's national team in the World Cup. And I felt like this documentary, while it pretty much went unsaid, this documentary was the evidence of that responsibility pie.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised by how much I thought was true we actually got to see on screen.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely excited to dive into this. Why don't you kick us off? Who do you think was who do you think bears the responsibility for last summer's World Cup?
All right, I'm going to start from the top. I'm not going to start with the biggest percentage first, but I'm going to get there relatively quickly.
Okay.
25% of the responsibility pie, U.S. soccer. I think there are some factors here. We talked about it during the World Cup. I think at worst, they alluded to it. The players and the journalists in the documentary talked about the rest of the world catching up. That's obviously true in terms of talent. One thing that you and I talked about a lot, and I've heard other pundits obviously talk about, is every other country, every European country, your big South American countries, they have the advantage of an impeccable footballing infrastructure already existing in those nations. They have just only applied it to the men's side of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So once those countries started to realize, of course, greedily and selfishly in many cases, oh, there's a lot of money in women's football. Let's just take that infrastructure and lay it over the lack of investment that we've been putting into the women's game for all these years. And instantly you have the ability to really close the gap between those other countries and U.S. soccer. And I thought that was pretty evident from the results. It's evident from the teams we see in leagues across the world. It's evident in the development we see in young players across the world. And I think U.S. soccer, it's hard to combat that, but you have to see that coming also. Like, hey, we got an advantage right now, but as we see the money rolling in, we have to be prepared for these things. And so this is going to dovetail into my next thing. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention U.S. soccer also, like many federations around the world, had to be pushed and bullied into even offering their players fair, equal wages over the last several years. And I just think it sucks when your employer is not treating you fairly and you have to fight for these kind of basic things. And we could say that didn't play a direct role in this World Cup. Just stop being a pain in our ass. Like you could do better as a federation. And the last piece is they hired Vlatko Andonovski. So I'm going to give U.S. soccer 25% of a responsibility pie. Did I say anything unfair in that?
I don't think so at all. The point around sort of like equal pay, though, I actually feel like U.S. women's national team players probably have it a little bit better than players on other teams from other countries.
For sure.
Even without the infrastructure, they've got brand deals, they've got things that they've fought for and earned 100%, but can't really look at that as a disadvantage because they're playing countries that are a lot more disadvantaged than they are.
Totally fair point. The broadcasters did a good job. One of the last group of friendlies where they talked about the wage that the team that had come to play us was getting. And it was just a total joke.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying there. Yeah, that's a really good point. A little bit of privilege in that, of me just saying, you're still inhibiting us in some ways. Stop doing that.
Yeah. 100%.
I want the full backing.
Yeah, I want the water level raised across the board globally. Like, that's basically, I think, what everybody wants to see.
For sure. Now let's get, at least in my view, the largest slice of responsibility pie. Now, sometimes maybe you're at a Christmas party, maybe Thanksgiving, largest slice of pie. If you have no shame about it, go ahead, do your thing. Sometimes responsibility pie, you don't want the biggest slice. So I'm sorry to have to do this to the guy. 40% Vlatko Andonovski.
Ooh, big slice.
Big old slice. Look, man, I recognize that I tend to, in the history of us talking sports together, I look toward coaches and managers when a team loses. Because I think a lot of times when you have great professional athletes, you lose games, you lose tournaments in the margins. And I think the chief responsibility of a manager, of a football manager especially, is that stuff that's like a little bit in the margins, whether it's in-game adjustments, in-tournament adjustments. And then you even have the bigger concepts off the field of you select the squad and you're supposed to create the idea for how those players on your squad can maximize their individual skills and excel as a team. And I just think, from us watching the tournament so closely, I just think that was really, really lacking from this squad. And when you saw like what Serena Wiegman did in England, the way the Dutch played, Sweden, the way Japan played, the way Spain played in spite of their manager.
Mm-hmm.
I think the worst thing you can say about a football team, and I've heard people say it about Manchester United on the men's side for weeks, when you have pundits, when you have former world-class footballers watching your team and going, I'm not sure what the idea is here. I don't know what they're trying to do on the field. That is a damning indictment.
Yeah, we'll get into the players' responsibility in a little bit, but it did feel like the players were sort of running the show. I think Alex Morgan alluded to her and Lindsay having the ability to go and talk to Vlatko and the younger players not being able to do that. And that's maybe not totally what you want. I understand that, they're great players, but first and foremost, you want a vision, right? And sort of like a philosophy before the players kind of get in there and start tinkering. I found it really interesting. Before the Vietnam game, Vlatko's telling the players, direct quote, "You hear this a lot. The world is catching up to the US. You know what that means? That means we're still on top. That means we're still the best. We are the gold standard. Let's get out here and play like we're the best. Play like we are the gold standard. Carry yourself like you're the best." He's basically saying, we're the best. Go out there, run a little, kick a little, sweat a little, and that should be enough to win the World Cup because we're the best. We're the gold standard. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, as I was watching that, I'm like, you think Belichick or Popovich or Spoelstra or Krzyzewski has ever told a team, hey guys, we're the best. We've got this. We're the gold standard. Like, what the fuck is that? So I think from day one, they alluded to him as being a player's coach. And that was probably taken advantage of. Like, that was even probably a soft way to communicate it. I think he had no control over what was going on or what they were running. And it was pretty clear, halfway through the group stage that we had run out of ideas. There were no ideas. There was nothing to go to when you go from basically not substituting the Netherlands game to then changing 3 starters from one game to the next. It's like, well, do we have talent in this roster or don't we? And I think just some wild swings. And a lot of that, to your point, has to fall on the shoulders of the coach. And 1 degree removed, USA soccer in general.
Totally agree. I think what I deemed the biggest managerial miss here is he played Sophia Smith out of position for the majority of her time on the pitch. I believe it was in service of Alex Morgan. It felt like the prevailing plan from Vlatko was you put Alex Morgan in marker at number 9 every match. And, we said it during the World Cup. I'll say it again. Alex Morgan is a legend. She's one of the greatest players in the history of the USA program. I would never dispute that. She has impact on and off the pitch. Sophia Smith is a better number 9 in the year 2023. I just don't think there's a lot of good evidence to dispute that. And so to play Sophia Smith on the wing, you diminish her skills. It's like one of my favorite parts about playing the FIFA video games where like a player could be like a 89 overall as a center forward. But if you're just like, oh, I'm going to do this tricky shit and move them to left wing, now they're an 81 overall. And that's like realistic.
100%.
If I'm not in the position to do all the shit that I'm really, really good at, you are naturally limiting everything that I'm good at. And I understand both Trinity Rodman and Lynn Williams are preferred right foot players, but you cannot convince me that Rodman on the left, Smith at number 9 in the center and Lynn Williams on the right would not have created a nightmarish situation for other defenses trying to run with those two on the wing and Sophia Smith's ability to finish in the middle. You cannot tell me that would not have been a better look than Morgan up there, who for the tournament had a hard time even getting the ball on target. And some of her shots where she did get it on target, they were real soft. They were real easy saves for the keeper. And, she's played a billion caps. She's had a long career. That's just going to happen. And I don't expect for 1 second for her to go to Vlatko and say, hey, boss, I think maybe Sophia takes my spot. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. So to your point, Vlatko very clearly lacked that level of control of the squad.
She just wasn't productive. 0 goals. She had 1 assist and she had a penalty kick that got blocked.
Yes, she did.
If Vlatko didn't have the juice to say, hey, Sophia Smith is our number 9 from jump, he definitely had evidence, maybe all the way through the Netherlands game, to be like, we've got to make some kind of change here. And he just didn't either have the juice or the gumption to actually make that happen. Sophia Smith, conversely, 2 goals, 1 assist in her 4 matches. But I will say, Vlatko, while he does bear some responsibility, he wasn't the one that went out and missed 22 shots, 11 on target against Sweden. He didn't go out there against the Netherlands, Portugal, and Sweden, and in those 3 matches, fire off 57 shots, 19 on target, and come away with 1 goal.
Mm-hmm.
The players did that. I think they got a little cute with sort of making him the scapegoat. But on the field, Lindsey Horan even alluded to this as well. She was like, hey, it's on us. We might be out there. We might see something and we've got to react and do things. And those reactions just kind of didn't happen. The same struggles to get going that we saw in the first third of the Netherlands game persisted through the next the next 6 halves of football.
Yep.
Where we really couldn't get anything going. And, they got looks, they got shots, they put shots on target, but weren't able to close.
So you lead me right into the next point I want to make. And you have now mentioned 2 quotes that I actually went back and transcribed word for word. We obviously do this podcast together, but it's funny that we're that much on the same wavelength. Before I move off of Vlatko, in the 2 major tournaments that he was the manager, the Olympics and the World Cup, 3 wins, 5 draws, 2 losses. Not good enough, man.
Wow.
You can't be the U.S. women's national team manager with that record. Now, it is worth saying that when a match goes to penalty kicks, that is a draw, but that would have only taken his record to 4 wins, 3 draws, and 3 losses. But either way, that's not getting it done. You cannot draw that many times if you're the manager of the U.S. women's national team. Now, let's move on in responsibility pie. You alluded to it, 30% the veterans on the squad.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have a lot more to say about this, but let's get to one of the quotes that you alluded to. This was from Alex Morgan. Quote, as a captain for this World Cup team, I had a lot of conversations with Lindsey Horan and Vlatko, being really honest with him, and he was incredibly receptive to that. But I don't know that a lot of other players felt the comfortability or vulnerability to have the chats with him that me and Lindsey had, end quote. Worth context, while she's delivering that quote, the players on the screen, I don't know, this feels like an editorial choice. I obviously wasn't in the room with the producers or the director. The players on the screen during that quote were Christy Mewis and Sophia Smith. Thought that was interesting. To the captain's culpability there, and I think you're right, it's why it jumped out to me. For Alex Morgan to say yeah, I could go and talk to Vlatko, and he was receptive to my ideas, but I don't know about the rest of the squad. You're the captain. In terms of middle management, so to speak, or I'm going to use a labor term, a member leader, somebody who is I'm part of the rank and file, but I have a beeline to management, then you have to bring those people in. Or you have to talk about those ideas or set up those meetings or say, hey, Naomi has a great idea. What are we talking about here? And again, I didn't expect Alex Morgan to say, you know what, maybe I should be a sub in this tournament. But it makes you wonder when she talks about having the ear of the manager, just part of her having the ear of the manager is play me at number 9. I'm Alex Morgan. I'm the number 9 for this squad. I'm the captain. Don't give me the armband unless I'm playing every single match. The second quote that you alluded to, that they play in the documentary directly after they play that Alex Morgan quote. So from Lindsey Horan, quote, obviously Vlatko gives us the game plan every single game, but we're the players on the field. So Portugal might do something different. Portugal might press harder. Portugal might stop this from happening. We should have come together and been this is not working. We need to do this. We need to try this. It's on all of us because we couldn't figure it out. Individually, collectively, we couldn't figure it out. End quote. That's a pretty interesting quote in my view. I think Horan is absolutely doing what you're doing and saying, hey, we're the ones missing shots. I thought it was real interesting that she said Portugal might press harder. Portugal might try to stop us from doing these things. That's one seemed to be fresh in Lindsey Horan's craw.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to your point that obviously the players are on the field, they have some culpability, but my ears really perk up. Individually, collectively, we couldn't figure it out.
You know, it harkens back to a thing that Vlatko said multiple times in the doc, which was, hey, go out there, be first to the ball, be first to, you know, the 50-50 balls, be first to the, you know, and it's like, okay, then what?
Yes.
That really alludes to the lack of ideas. So, you know, okay, we're first to a 50-50 ball. We put up 22 shots or whatever against Sweden. And then what? What happens when we can't break through? Or when Portugal's pressing? Wow, who could have seen that coming? I don't want to kind of like continue, you know, down the Vlatko route. He obviously bears huge responsibility. I'm totally with you in that. Morgan having Vlatko's ear, probably a lot of that. Hey, let's pencil in Morgan. Morgan saying, let's pencil in Morgan here. And then let's figure out the rest later. I did want to continue down the thread of the vets or the OGs. And I think Megan Rapinoe is one that kind of sticks out to me. Another one, US legend, World Cup champion, equal rights pioneer, all the accolades. But with all that said, when you bring a 38-year-old OG onto the roster, I'm of the opinion, I mean, I'm a Miami Heat fan, so we can go. The organization that defined what an OG should look like and be able to bring to the table, Exhibit A, Udonis Haslem. Close your eyes and picture Udonis Haslem laughing and bouncing and taking selfies after drawing Portugal and surviving by the width of the woodwork, right? Impossible.
Yeah.
They mentioned on the doc 14 U.S. players playing in their first World Cup, 14 debutants, if you will. And I can barely remember a moment seeing like Rapinoe doing anything for or around or on behalf of any of those 14. Like every time we saw Rapinoe, she's like clowning in front of the camera, or she's, you know, like chumming it up with Alex Morgan and Lindsey Horan, or talking to the media and charming, you know, the camera people and the journalists that are on site. And I don't know, like when you bring an OG like that, you kind of want somebody to have at least a voice, you know, like she just was not connected at all to the team. And I think they just kind of gave her a chance to kind of go out there and take a victory lap. But I don't know, in my opinion, that's a wasted roster spot, you know. And I think when you look at what she did on the field in the tournament, and I'm going to take the penalty kick off the table, the missed penalty kick, those things happen.
Right.
You know, we shouldn't have been in that situation to begin with, but she wasn't any kind of productive on the field, even in the minutes that she played. You know, there had to be some other options on the bench, somebody that could have had that spot. But again, the roster construction, very weird, no cohesion, no chemistry. The ages were all over the place. The level of stature, the level of influence with regard to who had the coach's ear and who didn't, all over the place. And we saw what we saw.
I think those are fair points. I totally get what you're saying. I love the Udonis Haslem as an OG comp of like, hey, this is the culture here. This is how we play. We're first to the ball, but then we also talk about simple things like overlapping runs or the pivot dropping back to maybe play defense or maybe trying a high press. I'm totally with you, not to go immediately back to Vlatko. Maybe some of that stuff was on the cutting room floor. That dude doesn't say anything about any real tactic throughout that entire documentary. Like, that's a little alarming. To your point about the players, Savannah DeMello got her second cap as a player for the U.S. women's national team in the game against Vietnam, the first match of the World Cup in the group stage. Her second cap with the squad. That seems weird. And DeMello, I thought, handled herself really well. I think she's a good player. I think she did fine. But going back to that cohesion that you talk about, if you're going to have these OGs and these vets, it would be nice to see them with somebody walk. And, you know, maybe we missed it. I don't want to like speak in like these huge, like, and I don't think you're doing this either. I don't want to speak in these really broad strokes.
I'm doing it a little bit because we also watch the games, bro.
That is true.
I didn't see it in the games either. You know, like,
that's fair.
Again, we're not in the locker room, so point taken. Yeah. But when I didn't see it in the games and I didn't see it in the doc, I'm fully acknowledging that I'm maybe leaping to some assumption or conclusion, possibly unfairly, but that's where I stand.
I feel you. I mean, it would be good to see Megan Rapinoe walking with her arm around Savannah DeMello, like, yeah, look, like I need you to be here, and then we're gonna do it. You know what I mean? Like, right. Just optically, you would like to see that. And if you never see it, or you feel like you never saw it, then maybe that's tricky. So I'm with you on that. I know you have more. I'm gonna let you cook some more on these vets. I will say there is going to be some natural decline in their play. I didn't expect Rapinoe to come out and be a world beater. I know you didn't either. I didn't expect Alex Morgan to come out and be a world beater, or Julie Ertz. I didn't expect Julie Ertz to play as well as she did. Again, in another part, a lifelong defensive midfielder. Oh yeah, but you're our center back now. It's just like that. It's just like that's another thing where it's like, okay, a lot of things are being disrupted here. But at the same time, I think what you're saying is largely fair, that you would have liked your vets to maybe do a little better, maybe show a little more.
We heard in the doc, Lindsey Horan retelling the story that Julie Ertz goes up to her and be like, the best thing you can do here is score when
Yep.
she gets into the thing with Van de Donk, right? Like, so there's some leadership there. We also saw Julie Ertz kind of leading on the field. And then another one I'll say is Kelly O'Hara, who we saw her when they got eliminated, super animated. And even in the doc, halftime of the Netherlands match, she's trying to talk to Alex Morgan, like, hey, let's think about, and Alex Morgan's just kind of walking away and she's like, okay, yeah. We saw this in the doc. And it's like, I don't know, man, that to me is just not leadership. You know, like if somebody's trying to stay engaged, the bare minimum that you could do as a leader is engage with them.
Sure.
Not kind of like walk away from them and be like, you know, you're not playing though. Like, it was so dismissive that moment. I really understood a lot better kind of what happened. I think we saw smidges of it just because we're watching from the Fox coverage, you know, the World Cup, but now we really got a lot closer look. To your point, there could have been a lot that we didn't see, but for the most part, a lot of it confirmed what we thought. And again, this was a production from Megan Rapinoe and others that, you know, like apparently had cutting room floor privileges, let's just imagine.
Yeah.
On multiple occasions, just to kind of scoop back to Alex Morgan real quick, she sort of mentions, sure, we want to win the World Cup. Of course, we want to win the World Cup. But, and I quote here, we're also here to break down barriers along the way. You know, and I get it. Like, she's a mom. Being a mom obviously comes first. But I will say, like, when you enter a tournament with this mindset that we're going to win and, oh, the barriers will break down along the way, you're going to face teams who just don't give a fuck about that second part. You know,
Sure.
They're there to fucking win and they don't give a fuck about no barriers. Like, they're just here to smash you. After seeing like the collective USA just roll the ball out mindset and we're going to be good, and their lack of chemistry, you know, the only two players with chemistry that we saw are Christy Mewis and Sam Kerr, which absolutely adorable, those two. I was 0% surprised that once things didn't go their way, they really had nothing to go back to. And the last thing I'll say is we lost to Sweden, but I think England, France, the Netherlands, if we meet them again, Japan probably beats us considering how they looked in the tournament.
Yeah.
You can throw Colombia in there as well as a team that might have given us some problems. And eventual champ Spain, in the form that they were in, looking how we looked, you know, let's say we get past Sweden, I think we were in that same top half of the bracket against Spain. That could have gotten ugly.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think Spain. I think Spain would have been a lot to deal with for this U.S. side in this current iteration with the level of organization or disorganization, depending on how you look at it. I think Spain and, to your point, Japan, those games could have got very, very interesting. Could have got ugly, I think, in some scenarios. So I'm with you, man. I thought the Morgan O'Hara interaction that they showed in the doc, I agree with you. I thought it was a little weird. It wasn't me or you trying to talk tactics with Alex Morgan. It's Kelly O'Hara, who's a world-class player, a leader, a champion, you know. And I'm with you. Alex Morgan probably wasn't even like intentionally being dismissive or anything. She's probably trying to get locked in, but like, here's a genius player who's watching the game from the sideline who has a different view than you. It would be nice to be like, okay, yeah. What are you seeing there? Okay, let's talk about it a little bit. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
That was a beige flag.
Yeah. Or, you know, we're both walking out of the locker room. Let's walk out side by side and continue this conversation. Not let me walk out ahead of you and have you just kind of follow me and you just kind of trail off there. Another funny moment too, when Kelly O'Hara sees Megan Rapinoe twerking, the look on her face, if you should go back and watch it, she's mortified. It's really funny. The younger players are getting a kick out of it. Kelly O'Hara's just like clutching her pearls. It's very funny.
I haven't seen it. No, I'll have to go back and check it out. I did not notice.
Go back and check it out.
Amazing.